Hey everyone,
Hey
welcome to
everyone,
welcome to Tech Tip Talk. I'm Sarah Walworth,
I'm Christina McGrath and we are Knitting Tech Editors.
and here's the intro.
Woo!
Woo! So here on Tech Tip Talk, we answer your questions about tech editing, knitting design, and knitting pattern writing. We invite you now to put any questions you have for us into the chat here, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Today we're talking with Holli Yeoh, who is an experienced and thoughtful knitting designer and teacher. And Sarah and I have admired her work for a long time. We've referred a lot of you guys to her work when you've asked us questions. She supports inclusivity in her patterns in a lot of ways, and she's been in the biz for a long time. We're really excited to talk with her about all that today.
All right, let's bring her in. Here she comes. And here we
Hello.
go. Center stage. Hi,
Holli.
Holly.
Hello.
We're so
Good to see
excited to
you.
have you join us today.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to be here.
And thank you to everyone who's joining us live. If you want to post any questions you have for Holly into the chat and maybe let us know where you're watching from. Holly, it's super exciting to chat with you about knitting design and about just your experience as a knitter. So before we started here, you said, how long have you been knitting?
For 52 years.
Which is
Since she
older
was
than
5 years old, guys. 5 years old, y'all.
Yeah, do the math. I guess I'm not shy about saying my age or letting you figure it out.
It's amazing because it just shows you how important knitting can be even when you're young, and then that it can be a lifelong adventure. So it's very exciting. So let's get started right away. We're going to jump straight into questions.
Okay.
You've been knitting since you were 5, but how did you get started working in the knitting industry?
So I have a fine arts degree, and I used to work as a jeweler, although that was sort of my evening and weekend job. My day job was working at the Vancouver Art Gallery. And I knew I wasn't being as fulfilled making the jewelry as I wanted to be, and I was always knitting, anyways. Had all my whole life, and I knew I wanted to start a family. And there are a lot of toxins. You're exposed to a lot of toxins in jewelry making, and not as many, not so much with fiber, especially if I'm not a dyer. So I just kind of figured it was time. It was time to focus on something else. I had this idea sort of before I started trying to get pregnant. It was kind of this idea that was in the back of my head for a little while, and then I put it into action. So I guess I think I published my first pattern when Hannah was about 1. So my business is about as old as her, because, you don't start the business on the day that you publish the pattern, right?
Right.
So that was before digital pattern writing. Is that
Oh, yeah.
correct?
Yeah, before Ravelry, before PDFs, it was print patterns. I mean, obviously I was doing everything on the computer. I wasn't typing them with a typewriter or anything, but trying to figure out, how do you include a photo and the instructions, and not many people were doing it, or at least, in my local yarn shops, I could only see a few examples.
Right.
So I looked a lot to what Lucy Neatby was doing. At that time, I was fortunate that I'd met her a couple of times at retreats and knitting workshops, and I would hit her up with questions, or I would just buy her patterns and then use them as a model.
Yeah.
So now she used to actually have a photograph glued to the front page.
I used to buy patterns that were like that. Yeah, they had like an actual photo on the pattern.
So I didn't do that. I used a digital photo that I had printed on the front page. So, it was in my Word document. I was building my programs with Word at the time, or sorry, my patterns with Word.
So you've had to make a lot of changes in your business if you first started printing patterns,
Yeah.
and then now fast forward, you have a website, you have digital downloads, we've got
Yeah.
Ravelry.
Yeah.
What was that like watching the industry grow into a digital format?
Well, once I trusted it, it was great. But at first I was, a little skeptical. I was worried about people stealing my patterns. I was worried about,
Yeah.
I mean, you buy the digital pattern and then you can print it up as much as you want. And I know that that was happening. It was for sure happening. I even found my patterns in a yarn shop that I had not sold them to. So that was frustrating. Um, Spent a lot of time thinking about watermarks and whatnot, and realized, even if you have a watermark on it that says something like, this needs to be an author. I can't remember what the wording was that everybody was using, but at the time, but even if somebody else sold it with that watermark on it, a customer
Mhm.
wouldn't actually have thought anything of it because they thought, well,
Right.
I bought it from this yarn shop, so it must be an authorized, you know.
Unauthorized copy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And then I realized, you know what? If people are going to steal, they're going to steal. You know, they'll 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 steal just as easy, or well, it might be easier for them to
Mhm.
do it, but I don't think there are more thieves because we sell digitally.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's just part of doing business, really any kind of business where you have some kind of product, right?
Right.
Or yeah,
Yeah.
intellectual property of some sort.
Right. We wanted to ask you about your design process too.
Mhm.
You've created more than 179 designs.
Yeah,
So
it's
how has your
182
design
now.
how has your design process evolved over all those years?
um, well, it started with, pencil and paper and knitting every size
Really?
to be
Like you would
sure.
knit a sample of every size?
Yeah, because I wanted to make sure it worked.
Oh, I love that.
So that,
That's admirable.
well, and I mean, well, luckily it was baby sweaters. So is where I started, I had a baby, right? So that's kind of
Right.
where my brain was focused. Um, yeah, there was, or at least that I was aware of at the time, there was no place you could go to learn how to write a knitting pattern for a hand knitter. So I felt like I was making it up as I was going along, and I needed to trust that what I was putting out was true and accurate. So I knit every size.
Right.
Hadn't heard of test knitters at that point. I guess my mom was my test knitter. She helped me with knitting every size, so I didn't necessarily knit them all myself. Between the two of us, we knit them. Um, but quickly, I realized I needed to be using a spreadsheet because I didn't trust that if I made a change in the math in one place in the pattern, might it affect something else elsewhere in the pattern. I mean,
Yeah.
as I'm sure we all
Right.
appreciate now,
Right.
or if the gauge changed slightly or whatever needs to be changed. So I wanted all of that in a spreadsheet so that every number is connected to itself.
Right.
If I needed to add 2 for the 2 selvage stitches, I wouldn't do it in my head and key in, oh, that's 40 stitches now. I would go take the number 38 from a previous line and go +2, so that
Right.
if that number 38 changed for whatever reason, because maybe I decided it needed to be an odd number to fit the stitch pattern or what have you, then all those changes would just sort of go through the pattern.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time, or over time, I developed my spreadsheets, so I feel really confident in them. And I certainly get a lot of comments from tech editors saying that they don't find many mistakes in my patterns.
Woo!
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
That
you
feels
know,
good.
yeah, it does, and I'm so, and I attribute that to how I use my spreadsheets, and I have attention to detail. That's just my thing.
Do you
We get
create
that.
do you create templates that you work from for your designs, like, based on construction or, like, do
Um,
you
Basically, I'll grab an old spreadsheet from a previous design that has similar construction considerations, and then rejig the numbers.
Yeah.
So I'll go through it, and so at least the structure is already there. They all have the size chart at the top, and how I figure out ease and those sorts of things, and even figuring out how to make it fit a particular stitch pattern. I just need to change some numbers at the top to say what my stitch pattern is, and
Yeah.
or change my gauge. It isn't like it just automatically creates a new pattern for me.
Oh, I
Um,
wish.
do you
We're not
remember?
there yet.
Yeah. Do you remember there used to be programs you could buy?
Yes. Was it like InvisoKnit or something like that?
Yeah,
I
there
can't
were a
remember.
few
Oh
of them.
yeah.
There were a few of them, and I hadn't thought about them in years, but they've definitely gone by the wayside, or at least they're not on my radar any longer, which is good. Because I don't think designers, people who are writing and publishing patterns, should be using those. I
Mhm.
think you need to know what you're doing to understand what you're doing.
Well, I think what you said in the beginning, you said you have a fine arts degree.
Mhm,
I think design is not just numbers.
mhm.
It's not just dragging the cell across in Excel. There
Yeah,
is an aspect of art to this. There's an
definitely.
aspect of thinking about how it will look on the body, or how it will how the stitch pattern sits on the piece.
Yeah,
Well, and it's not enough to have a program do it for you. There's going to be places in your grading or design process where you're going to have to make choices and changes and nuance
yeah,
that you're not that maybe a program isn't going to be able to provide that.
yeah, exactly. And I think those programs only did one size too, if memory serves. So I suppose one could have plugged in measurement numbers, and done it 10 times or whatever. Well, back in those days, it was probably 3 times, right? Small, medium, and
Mm,
large. I mean, that was the norm. Oh, you're
right.
lucky if you got an extra small and an extra large.
I know, I know.
So talk to us a little bit about the art side of your design. Where do your ideas come from? That's a lot of designs, 180.
Yeah.
Do you have more than that going on in the background? Like, do you
Oh,
have
yeah.
file folders full of ideas?
Yeah, definitely. Not file folders so much. I should probably record more of the ideas than I do. um, I'm inspired by all sorts of things, but what seems to work best for me is actually answering a call for submissions,
Mm.
because they give some parameters. So
Right.
now the world is not my oyster.
And what gives you a jumping off place.
Exactly. Like, oh, you want cables. Okay, so now I'm only going to think about cables. Or you want, boho chic is on the runway this season, or whatever. However, whatever publisher has described what it is that they want to have in their upcoming issue or their upcoming book or whatever it is that they're publishing. And the ones that work the best for me are the ones that are written out information, as opposed to a mood board, which is just images. Um, I don't, although I have a fine arts degree, when would think that I would be artistic, it's actually the information, the verbal information that
That's
Oh gosh,
works
I'm the
better
same
for me.
way. I have a
word.
fine arts degree too, but yeah, mood boards are not my thing.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think that way.
Because I just want to copy what I see, and that's not the point, right?
Right. But there is some restriction there because you're fitting into their ideas, but then you're interpreting it with your own vision.
hmm hmm And so once I have read a call for submission, and I don't even need to necessarily submit anything to that call, but it's enough to get the juices flowing. And so everything I see in my life as I go about my daily life, walking down the street, getting groceries, watching TV, everything is sort of with the lens of whatever that call was.
Oh.
So I see somebody walking down the street ahead of me, and something about the shape of the garment that they're wearing, you know, twigs an idea. So I'm
Love
like
it.
taking pictures behind,
You do
stopping
that
people.
too? You take
Oh, yes,
surreptitiously
yes,
taking
yes.
pictures of people's sweaters or
And when
shirts?
my kid was young and with me everywhere I went, I would just say, "Stand over there," and here she is, like smiling, and I'm like taking a picture of something behind her.
I
But
love it.
she
Sneaky.
knew what I was doing.
That happened to
That
me
is
this week.
fantastic.
I saw a lace pattern on someone's sweater. It was probably a thrifted sweater, but I was like, "Oh, that's really cool how it flows."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm not a designer, but I love seeing it. I get inspired myself.
Yeah, and talking about thrifted sweaters, like thrift shops are a great place to get ideas. Um, I, my husband and I like going to factory outlet malls when we are on holidays, and I actually shop for ideas. I shop for stitch patterns. I shop for, so I'm not actually buying anything or look, I'm just looking around, and I like looking in the menswear because there are nice sweater ideas there.
Yeah.
I agree. So, thanks everyone for joining us live. If you have any questions for Holly, do throw them into the chat. We'd love to see what you guys have to ask Holly. So, Holly, tell us how Bespoke came into being, and I believe that's what's behind
Yes,
you.
yes. So this is Bespoke. Um, my stepfather is a knitter, and for his birthday, I wanted to design, or I gifted him a bespoke sweater, but a bespoke sweater knitting pattern. I wanted to design something that he would want to knit for himself. And so we sat down, and he sort of didn't know where to start. So I just pulled a bunch of old submission ideas that I had for men's sweaters or sweaters that I thought might interest him as a starting point. And then I grabbed a whole bunch of swatches that I had from those or other ideas. And I asked him, do you want cables? Do you want whatever? And, what do you like most about your favorite sweaters? So, I mean, that's how the shawl collar came in. Pockets. I mean, everybody wants pockets in their sweaters. And and so we sort of used those old submission ideas as a jumping off point. But this was definitely its own unique design, nothing I had designed before. And as I was working on it, I was thinking, well, I want this sweater for myself. So why don't I make it gender inclusive? But I don't want to make it just unisex, because really all unisex is a man's size, to fit on a woman's body. Or I should say, a broad-shouldered size to fit on a narrow shouldered body, but one that might have,
Breast.
a larger breast chest
Chest
circumference.
Yeah, chest circumference.
So that's kind of where the idea for Bespoke started, or having it as a gender inclusive pattern. And so you work your way through the pattern and choose either the narrow or the broad shoulders, either the longer or the shorter sleeves, and longer and shorter body, and to sort of cobble together the pattern that
Will fit your body.
will fit your body. Yeah, yeah. So it's not like 100% modifiable. Well, anybody could modify it beyond the pattern, but you can get, as good as size charts are able to provide us, you can hit those different sort of body shapes.
How hard was it to fit that patterning? Like it's a texture pattern, correct?
Yeah, it's a cable on a stocking stitch ground.
Oh, okay. So was it hard to get that, like I'm thinking always of repeats that are gradable,
Stitch counts.
stitch counts. Was it hard to fit that into the various possible sizes?
I kept the size of the cable the same
Okay.
because I felt it just makes a background texture more than
Right.
really strong cables. And I think maybe it's an 8-stitch repeat. I think the cable is 6 stitches and there's probably 2 stitches between.
Okay, so it's not wide, and that probably makes it more possible, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you have different choices, almost like a choose your adventure story, right?
Yes,
Like
yeah.
you have different choices you can make for different parts of the sweater that come together to make a pattern that will fit you. How complicated was that to do your grading and sort of, which spreadsheet template was that? Like,
It was about the same as knitting as grading 4 patterns. Right,
Wow.
and writing the
yeah,
instructions. Writing the instructions was really challenging to be clear and for people to be able to follow. And I've received a few pattern support questions where really, I think the knitter, it might be the first time they ever encountered anything that said, for sizes this, and this, do this. obviously if you're not that size, you skip those instructions. And I don't think
Right.
she understood that. So, but that's, I mean, that's a standard thing in a lot of patterns. It's not specific to this pattern.
Right.
So yeah, there was a little bit of education. I haven't received actually, maybe she was the only person. So I was a little worried when right out the gate, I get this first pattern support question.
I
Uh,
love the idea of choosing it by the shoulder. The shoulder is like shoulder width is where you start. So is it, tell
yeah,
me how it's constructed. Is it top down,
no, it's bottom
seam?
up.
Is it pieces?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm a bottom up in pieces kind of person. That's,
Ah,
that's what I cut my teeth on, both knitting, just learning to knit, and then writing patterns. So this whole top down in the round fad, I
which
see it
is
as,
basically like a barber pole anyways. So if you
yeah, I see it as a
line.
fad. I don't think it makes structurally sound sweaters. They're not going to stand up over time. They're not going to be the
Yeah,
Yeah,
not in the
heirloom piece that
same way.
yeah, you're not going to
right,
have that in your wardrobe 20 years from now, or it
right.
won't be that sweater that your mom had that you're so grateful that now you can wear it, or you know what I
Mm,
mean? Whereas
yeah.
something like this, it's going to stand up to the test of time because it has the seams that create the structure. It's also easier to knit a smaller piece, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I've
You
been
know,
finding a lot of joy in knitting pieced sweaters lately because you feel like you're making progress
yeah,
so much quicker. And like you just said, you can grab a sleeve, grab a front. Like you don't have this giant
Right.
behemoth that you're twirling around your lap to
yeah,
knit on.
yeah, and it doesn't get all pilled before you ever even get to wear it the first time, right? I mean, if everybody's knitting with merino and singles are kind of popular,
Oh,
think
yeah.
about those pilled sweaters
You're
that
gonna
people
get you gotta get your sweater shaver out before you even block it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I want to hear in our audience, everybody tell us, are you a pieced person, a sweater piece? Does it
Oh yeah,
depend?
chime in. I've been loving
Chime
talking
in,
about
top
this
down.
lately.
I'm a top down in the round, but that's what I cut my teeth on for sweater knitting. But
Yeah,
I really appreciate what you said about longevity. If we spend this much time creating something bespoke, which I want to talk
mhm,
about that title of the pattern, maybe it's okay to spend more time to seam and do things that are going to be structurally a little bit have more longevity than a tube that's going in a spiral.
yeah, and when you think about, well, how much time we spend knitting it,
Right.
if we placed a dollar value on that, like,
Uh,
what do you earn in your job, right? In your day job.
it's cheap entertainment is the way
Exa
I look at
Well,
it.
yeah, yeah, and then you think about how much that yarn cost.
Right.
Um, it just makes sense to sort of give it the best that you can give it.
Well, and
So
I think that sometimes a seamless set in sleeve, sometimes picking up the stitches on that edging that's created by the weight, sometimes
Yeah.
that can be pretty good,
mhm,
Oh,
but
yes,
other kinds of construction because like Sarah was saying, and like it's an option in your pattern, like you said, the shoulders are so important to the fit of the sweater.
right.
mhm,
And they're so important to the structure of the sweater. Like it's
mhm.
all this is the business up here, right? Like
Right.
it's important for the fit, it's important for the longevity of the garment. Like it's important. It's so I mean, it's so cool that you've paid so much close attention to that in your
Yeah, well, I mean, our shoulders are like the hanger, right? The
Yeah.
whole weight, when you bring that bag of yarn home, you can feel how heavy that is, right?
yeah.
Well, all that weight is hanging off of just this little area right here, and the back neck as well. But sort of this area from here to here. So the weight of a sleeve. Well, gee, have you ever wondered why your seams are down here? Well, because the weight of the sleeve kind of stretched it out a bit. So having a nice strong shoulder seam that doesn't stretch at all is
Mhm.
one way of stopping those sleeves from dragging down the weight.
All right. So do you encourage mattress stitch or another kind of seaming?
I like three needle bind off for
Nice. For the
shoulder seam.
shoulders, because you're
For
doing
the
it from
shoulder,
the bottom up, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I like it because, well, for myself anyways, my bind offs are usually pretty tight. I have to really concentrate on keeping them loose. So I just make sure that my bind off is even extra firm. So I'll do short row shaping to get the taper.
Yeah.
And then it's a nice straight line. I leave my stitches live, and I join it by doing a 3-needle bind off later.
Yeah. I love
And
it.
I write that into my patterns.
Got you.
That's fantastic. So tell us a little bit about this name. Bespoke has a certain connotation.
Well, it was my working title because truly it is bespoke. I mean, it's
Was for your stepfather.
yeah, exactly. It's to his specifications, both measurements and desire for what he wanted to wear on his body. Shawl collar, pockets, cardigan as opposed to a pullover. What weight yarn, so it's a DK weight yarn.
But that word speaks to me of couture, of not ready to wear, like, and it's something you can't buy,
Custom made.
custom made.
Well, and isn't that all of our sweaters, really?
Yes!
But yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know what? So you know what though, Holly? Some some of the patterns, they don't give as good of a fit. So like I think
Well,
that
that's
bespoke and custom made also sort of implies that it's going to fit you well and be, appropriate for your body, not just a generic sweater, you know?
yeah. And I mean, most of my sweaters have those details in them, not to the degree that this one does. This is the first time that I've tried to make one to accommodate the broad and narrow shoulder type bodies. And I would love to see how other designers approach that, going forward. There's got to be an easier way. Or maybe there isn't. Or
I
maybe
don't know. I mean,
maybe
it's
it's tailored.
complex.
Yeah, it is complex.
Bodies
It's
are complex.
complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated. It's a lot of combinations to get right.
Hmm.
So, it's very exciting.
But I think it
I'm
also
excited
comes
to see
back
what
to
you do.
what you said. It's like, how much is our time worth? Like, how much is this worth if it's something that we're creating that's going to end up in our closet for a couple decades? Maybe
Yeah,
get passed on,
and be worn as opposed to
be
the back of
worn.
the drawer for a couple of decades.
Right.
You keep it out of guilt, and then you finally get rid of it.
Keep
Exactly.
it
But
out
don't
of
wear it.
guilt. That's exactly what it happens.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So let's move a little bit into the business side of being in design. You've been in a long time. So how have you made this creative work sustainable for yourself?
Um, I I reuse ideas. um, so when I answer a call for submission now, I might submit, I don't know, like 10 to 14 designs for a call.
Wow.
And usually my calls are something's accepted. I don't just submit one. So um but having done this for so many years, I can grab old submission ideas and repurpose them. I might need to tweak them, whether it's changing color or a stitch pattern or a slight construction detail or whatever, um, or just even how I word it in the proposal, in the submission. And so I'm repurposing ideas. I went through all of my submissions um, last night to just get an idea. So one of the sweaters that was published, maybe in 2018, I had used that same swatch for a total of 9 submissions.
Oh, I love this idea.
And so 7 of them were one sweater design idea. And then I sort of adjusted and one silhouette. And then I kind of switched up the silhouette a bit and submitted it twice under the second silhouette, and it was accepted the second time. And some of those submissions were to the same publisher.
Right.
So just because somebody says no, or just because a submission isn't accepted, it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It just didn't fit with the publisher's story for their publication at that time. Or maybe they wanted to accept something from somebody else that was very similar. Or maybe they accepted something different from you that time. Because again, I submit more than one thing at a time. And, for success, when submitting, answering calls for submission, I think that's the key is give them lots of options. And
Do people ever accept more than one of your
yes,
design ideas? Like, so then do you have to produce like 3 or 4 sweaters or
yeah, yeah,
items?
yeah. So most recently, I had 5 pieces accepted, and in fact, they decided that they wanted to just offer a whole ebook that's all mine, but that hadn't been their initial intent.
How do you knit that fast?
So that was with Knitpicks, and they they pay a sample knitter to knit the samples.
Oh, good.
So the designer does not need
to
to
produce them.
to produce a sample for Knitpicks. The designer sent yarn to produce their own sample, but you don't have to necessarily meet the deadline as long as you're confident that
Yeah.
your written instructions will make the sample. So I've been doing this long enough that I now
Those
no longer
spreadsheets
need to knit every size.
those
Sometimes,
spreadsheets.
yeah, I sometimes don't even need to knit the sample because I know it's going to work. I also have the fail safe of somebody else following my instructions. Now I prefer to have knit it myself, because I do catch things that somebody else might not catch, uh, as they deviate from my design idea, as opposed to maybe, the instructions weren't wrong. It worked.
Right,
It got assembled, but maybe that wasn't my intent.
right.
Um, so that latest thing with Nick Pick. So it was published this past spring. It was, the name of the collection was La Belle Époque,
Mhm.
and there were five pieces in it. But before that, oh no, one other time before that, I had 5 pieces in a book. I had to ask for family help in the knitting.
You had to put out the knit signal.
Yeah,
Help!
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love it. But I also love the fact that you're so experienced in this that you can reuse information, reuse
Mhm.
ideas, but then at the same time, you also don't have to knit it as you're designing, right? Like you
Yeah,
design it
that's
ahead of
not my
time.
process at all. I write and grade it before I sit down to knit.
Okay.
So the full pattern in all sizes has been written.
All right. I gotta ask this. How big is the swatch?
Um, they're probably about this big.
All right, good. I was
So yeah,
I
I'm doing more than a 4-inch swatch, but I'm not doing a 10-inch swatch. So one of my students in my class this past week, where we're knitting, your first sweater ever, she asked, "Well, I've heard you have to knit a 10-inch swatch." I'm like, "Well, yeah, that would be great, but realistically, I can't ask people to do that. I can't expect people to do that. So maybe if you make it 6 inches."
That's like half a ball of yarn. Come
Yeah,
on, that's a
yeah.
lot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a designer, and I'll knit more than one swatch. So I might spend hours on knitting swatches, sorry, hours on swatching,
Wow.
to decide which hand I like
Yeah.
the best. And oh, maybe if one is like a goofy gauge where it ends up being, and 3/4 inches or point, like, if it's doesn't hit bang on a half or a full,
Try
so
again.
over
Oh,
4
yeah.
inches, then yeah, I think I'll
That's
just
always a question we
Go
get.
again.
Can you do partial stitches?
yeah,
No.
yeah, it's frustrating.
So from beginning to end, like the idea to completed published pattern, how long does your process does what do these ideas live in the process? And how long does it take sometimes for them to become something someone can
Oh,
purchase?
that's a good question. I didn't
And
think.
I didn't ask you this ahead of time, so look at her.
Yeah.
She's going into her,
Yeah, she had to go looking because
look at her
Sarah's throwing out the
file.
surprise questions now.
Okay, so that sweater design idea that I said I'd submitted 7 times, the first time I submitted it was in 2012,
Oh, wow.
and it was published in, when I submitted it, it was submitted, the one that was accepted was submitted in 2018. It may have been published in 2019, because
So
things take
listen,
time.
people, don't give up.
Don't give
Yeah,
up.
It takes
don't
like
give up.
7 years.
Yeah, yeah, don't give up. And I mean, there was another one where, it was more a technique, but the technique spurred on all of these other, or inspired all of these other designs. And so I think, so it was modular knitting, but it was just in strips.
Mhm.
So it could either be straight, or if you did it on the bias, at an angle. And I've got 18 submissions based on that. But really, they're just the same idea, sort of regurgitated over and over. Um, the first thing was a sweater that I self-published, but then all the rest are blankets.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and so I have 4 published blankets that use this idea, but they all look different from one another.
Right.
And I've got another blanket actually in the works, for a publisher.
This
So
kind of goes with, oh,
do
go
you
ahead,
have a
Sarah.
favorite yarn you like to start with, or do your design how hard is it to marry that yarn and the design in your head? Because you
Um,
have to swatch it out ahead of time, right, with the correct weight and pattern?
yeah, I don't specify yarn in my submissions or my design ideas. I learned early on that they change it.
Mm,
So there was no point in me getting a
married
con-
to a yarn.
yeah, exactly. So my designs tend to be more kind of, well, this will work for a DK to a worsted weight yarn, or sport to worsted. So you've got sort of
Like
like
a
three.
particular characteristic of yarn as opposed to something specific.
Exactly, exactly. Consequently, I'm not designing with sort of more novelty. I don't mean novelty like the fun fur ones, but like a ribbon yarn, or maybe a boucle or something. Like, I'm not specifying those kinds of things. Generally speaking, I just choose a smooth plied yarn.
And those are more available, so then that also
Yeah,
adds longevity to your patterns, and
Right.
exactly. And
it
sometimes my swatch might have been swatched in fingering, but it's just a photograph. You can't tell it's fingering in the photograph of a swatch necessarily.
yeah.
So I'll say this will be suitable for these weights of yarn. Um, or that's how I deal with it in my submissions.
So is, like, your living room just littered with swatches? Like, do you have just, like, swatch piles everywhere? Like
No, but I do have 2 huge Rubbermaid bins of them.
do you, like,
That must be so fun.
do you keep information on those, like, so that
I
you
I
can
I
refer
don't.
back to them?
I don't. I do photograph them, and my intent was to archive the photographs. I do keep all the photographs in their own place. I can find them on the computer. um, I meant to attach information to the photos, and some of the older ones have it, so I even know which Stitch Dictionary I got it out of.
Ooh.
So I don't have to like be leafing through them all trying to find it. The odd time I haven't, and I've actually had to rip the swatch
Oh.
and reverse, like I wasn't able to even just look at it and figure out the stitch pattern. I actually had to rip out a row and jot down what each stitch was as I unraveled it.
Oh my gosh, I
Forensics.
love this so much.
Knitting with forensically.
Yeah.
You're giving us amazing amounts of
Oh my
advice, and so
gosh,
this
I
totally
love
leads
it.
into what we wanna ask you next, which is what advice would you give to a brand new designer just starting out?
Well, never give up. Keep
Yay!
submitting those ideas. If you're submitting to publications, um, submit lots. Give them choice, right? In art college, I remember my jewelry teacher would say, "Okay, that piece is great. Now make 10 more." And she didn't mean do a production line. She meant each one will riff off the next one, and you'll get 10 more ideas. And the ideas get better and better as you go, right?
Love it.
So that's something I carry forward with me for sure. The other thing is, especially if you're self-publishing, go as you mean to. Oh, what's that expression? Start as you mean to go, I think. In other words, have everything tech edited. Like, don't just assume that, okay, well, my mom went through this and my best friend went through it, and I had a test knitter and I think I'm good. Nobody
Right.
had problems. Um, Definitely have your work tech edited. There's
Yes.
sort of no question on that one as far as I'm concerned.
It's fantastic. That's fantastic advice.
Yeah, so start out, do things in the beginning the way you know you'll need to do them. Um,
10, 20,
yeah,
50 years from now.
yeah, that's really
Yeah,
good
yeah,
that's really good advice.
Begin as you want to continue.
yes.
So
I love
tell
that.
us, Holly, What are you excited about now? What are you working on? What's getting you up in the morning and making you smile?
um,
Mm.
I've been playing with some stitch patterns that, the sunspot stitch pattern, or you may know it.
I may
Um,
not.
there's something in it that has always bothered me. So I've been playing with it and making it better, but also just playing with circles in knitting, because usually we don't do circles in knitting. So just
Right.
playing with nothing in mind for what it's going to become, or and that's something completely new for me. I don't usually just play with that.
I love it.
And then the other thing, industry wise, is the inclusivity that's being more and more prevalent and more demanded by our people.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
and I was
because if you started back when print
where it was
patterns
just small and medium.
or
Yeah,
where, mine ended at like size 42-inch or less
yeah,
chest circumference. This must be exciting for you.
yeah, it is. And at first, size inclusivity baffled me, not because I didn't understand that we needed to offer those sizes, but because I already did offer those sizes. So I
Right.
couldn't understand what the issue was. When I started using my first size charts, I think it was the Craft Yarn Association and ASTM, and then later as old as, were the initial ones that I was sort of looking at. They went up to, I think, about a 60 to fit a 60-inch chest circumference.
Mhm.
So I couldn't understand why people weren't knitting patterns up to that size. Like, you have the information available to you. You don't even have to pay for it. So why aren't you doing that? So it took me a while
Amen.
to
Really good
understand.
question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I've since expanded mine more. I think I go up to about a 68 and I start at a 28 to fit. So that's before ease. Um, but because I know how to grade, I can extrapolate out. I can eke out those sizes just a little more. And as I'm can find more information, there's lots of neat things or interesting things that are happening. Kim McBrien Evans has developed a size chart based on real bodies. I mean, the ASTM's is from the 50s. I'm not sure where the Crafts Yarn Association, CY.
Craft Yarn Council.
Thank you.
Council.
I always get it wrong.
Yeah, we don't know where they get their information
I don't
either.
Yeah,
know either.
yeah, yeah, and they have their numbers have gotten better over the years.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I wish I had recorded their size charts over the years so I could see the change.
They have changed.
They have.
I've just like looked at an old one I'd had printed, and designers didn't match. And she's like, I'm like, that's what I'm using. Well, no, it's new, it's different. They
Yeah,
still have like a range, which can be
yeah,
kind of
that kind of
confusing.
confuses me, but yeah, but so it's exciting to see that there's more information available. There are more people who are talking about it and sharing. When I started in this industry, there was no sharing.
Right.
No.
Everyone was very guarded, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, I figured something out, but I don't want to like give that information away for free. I spent time figuring this out, so I'm keeping it. And uh that's never kind of been how I think. um so I'm quick to show people or provide information, but it's nice to see that others are doing that as well.
Yes.
I agree.
A rising tide lifts all boats is
Yeah.
what our one of our guests, Tian Connaughton, says, and I just love it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so
Yeah,
true.
and
I
she
mean,
is doing great work in this industry too, for sure.
Mhm.
it's so
Yeah,
true.
it's fantastic.
I saw that you had it written on your website that if anyone found an older design that wasn't in a size they needed, that they could contact you and you would provide that size for them. And I just thought that was such a wonderful way to support what you care about your patterns being, like I just love that so much.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So other than maybe just one that I self-published, which I don't know why I stopped at the size that I stopped at. I don't, didn't write notes to myself. Um, all of the others that aren't size inclusive were published by third party.
Right.
And initially, if the third party said we want it to go up to a 2X, then that's what I gave them. I have since just given them my whole size range, and
Good for you.
nobody has cut off the extra sizes.
Oh, that's
Way
actually
to go,
really
Holly.
good information.
Yeah.
Just go
That's
ahead and
good
give
to
them
know.
everything.
Just give them everything. Yeah.
Give them everything.
Yeah. So when I realized that, it was like, well, actually, when I realized it, I was published in a book where I had been told to go to a 2X. There were other pieces in the book that went larger. And I was really miffed because, of course, I'm capable. And then I had probably actually graded it larger. What I presented them was only to
That's
a
what
2X.
you were asked for.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm a bit of a rule follower. And I was like, hang on a second. These people didn't follow the rules, but actually it turned out to be, in my mind, to their benefit. So I stopped, following those rules, and I just give them my full size range. And
You're a rule breaker to be a change maker.
yeah. And so I've mentioned that I work with nitpicks a lot. I have found them extremely responsive to the issues within our industry. So I've always given them my full size range. Now they demand that range of everyone.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah. And other things as well. I mean, their models are much more diverse. They're they're responsive.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really good to hear.
So everybody who's still here with watching us live, any questions you have for Holly? Because we're getting close to the end of our interview and we want to make sure you get your questions answered. So throw it into the comments chat box now. All right, Christina, it's time. You ready?
Ask her.
All right. We ask all our guests the same question, and we're kind of keeping an informal poll. What is your favorite knitting or crocheting notion? And we love these answers. We just love them.
Well, I'm probably going to be kind of boring. It's stitch markers.
Oh no, you're in
No, you're
up
good
in
company.
that's
But
the most popular answer.
but just the simplest, most common type. They're lightweight. They're consistent in how they open. They're always removable. I use these exclusively until I realize they leave marks in my knitting because they change your gauge in that one spot.
Those are big.
If you have one every 20 stitches,
Right.
track of whatever, then every 20 stitches, you're going to have like this. Nice.
That's a good tip too. I hope you guys are all taking notes today because Holly's dropping all this really good stuff.
So then I use these ones for those situations, but I use these ones. These are my preferred ones because they open and close more easily.
Yeah.
But they're lightweight. They're not dangly. I know there's all those pretty jewelry.
Oh, I'm the same. Yeah.
But they do, for some reason, they just do not appeal to me at all.
They get caught in the yarn and they get in my way.
Yeah.
And if they flip around.
Yeah.
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 Nope.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
No plain Jane when it comes to stitch markers.
I used to not use stitch markers because I used to think, well, I can remember. And yeah, I can remember, but stitch markers make it easier.
No kidding.
You know, they
You don't have to
also
think so hard.
They also give you more options for writing instructions. You know, they
Yes.
can simplify how you write instructions. Which
100%.
is what I like about them.
Yeah.
So where can people find you online? If people want to check out Bespoke, we are going to put a link below, but where else can they find you?
Well, of course, I'm on Ravelry, Holli Yeoh. Instagram, Holli Yeoh. And I have a website, holliyeoh.com.
Makes it super easy.
Yeah.
And that's
you
important.
just have to spell my name right.
Yeah. I think it's important though what you mentioned about a designer starting out, like thinking about branding, like how are you going to do this so people can find you easily?
If you have a business name that's other than your own name, then you actually have to brand, or you have to market both.
Oh, wow. That is interesting.
Yeah. And our industry is a personality driven industry. So that's kind of why our names are important. People want to know about you.
Yes, exactly. People want to know you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get nervous about using their personal name for their design brand, but it's obviously it's who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I usually don't share this story because it's been misconstrued in the past. I used to have a different business name, and didn't think I needed to trademark it or anything because I knew I would never sue anybody. What didn't occur to me is if somebody else chose a similar name and wanted me to cease and desist.
Wow.
And so it was something along those lines. It was a completely unrelated business, had nothing to do with the knitting industry, but was children's garments. And I was designing baby sweater patterns at the time. And they wanted me to stop using my business name. And that really sort of stalled me for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I was miffed and
Well, it kind of shakes you up too. Like,
yeah, yeah,
hold on.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when I switched over to my name, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It solves a lot of problems to use your own
Yeah,
name then.
yeah. And you don't have to register it because
Mhm.
it's your name. I mean, if you're going to
Yep.
work, I know it's different in different countries, but in Canada, if you're a sole proprietor, um, um, the money is you have to claim it and everything, but it's just coming into your account. It's not coming into a separate
Mhm.
corporation or
Right.
trademark business or anything. So you don't necessarily have to register it.
Yeah. Same for me. It makes it simple.
Well,
That's for sure.
thank you for being here today. This is like a little mini design class. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's always fun talking about what we do.
It is. It's super exciting. I think we got one last question, if you
Yeah.
don't mind. Christina, what do you think? Let's throw it up here. Lineski?
Well, so we talked about how you use a design idea many times. So she's asking what's an example of something you've repurposed. Um,
Um,
Like different motifs
yeah,
or
yeah. Well,
different
so if you're interested in looking up the blanket designs, or maybe we can have them as a list, I can supply you with them. So
Mhm,
my first design that was modular knitting in strips was a baby sweater called Jamie.
mhm.
And then so the blanket patterns were Zig and Zag. That was published third party, and I don't have the rights to sell that pattern. That's another thing. Decide
Oh,
whether you want the rights to revert to you or not. Um, and then Evening Mesa blanket, Flash Forward blanket, Joinery blanket.
well, and the
Um,
link I shared in the comments is her pattern page on her website.
yes.
yeah, so I'm not sure. Definitely Zig and Zag won't be on it because I decided not to put third party ones that don't benefit me in
Don't
the
give
long
you
run.
rights. Mhm. But on
But
your Ravelry page, is it there maybe?
yeah, you'll be able to find them all on there for sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, go to I bet you we could see if we went to your Ravelry page, we could probably see how things are used, repurposed again and again.
yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Holly.
You're welcome.
And thank you for being here today. Anne Marie Hart says Holly's the best, and we agree.
Thanks. Thank you.
It was so much fun talking with you today. Thank you for being here.
We were
And
super honored to have you on. It was awesome having you
Oh,
here.
thank you. Thank you. It was fun. I really enjoyed it.
and we'll see you soon. Thanks a
Okay.
lot for
Thanks,
being
Holly.
here. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And let's chat a little bit. Hi, everyone. We are a month off from showing up at Rhinebeck together to do a book signing at the Merit Book booth. And we wanted to let you guys know that our book is going to be published on October 31st. Do you want to throw that link in there? Oh, there it is.
Tina,
We
have a
got
copy of that. I'm so excited.
we got our copies in the mail, and those are our test copies. We only get one. And we'll put some links in down below and into the
Guarding it
chat.
with my life, like not
Yeah,
even
are you guarding it with your life?
am.
So if you've already pre-ordered and you come to Rhinebeck and you don't have your book yet, we got book plates for you and bookmarks so we can sign it. Hold it up closer to the camera. Oh yeah, so we can sign these for you so that you have a sticker with our signature and our dedication to you put into the front of your book. So actually, let's throw in Merit book if you have the
Oh, okay. Yep.
Merit one. If you are interested in buying a book, pre-order from us and have it picked up at Rhinebeck, now's the time to get in your order for the Merit Book booth, and we will be there on Saturday and Sunday, both
Saturday and
days.
Sunday.
Yeah, we're pretty excited to be this. I've never been to Rhinebeck, so this is going to be really exciting for me. And we just want to say a huge shout out to our patrons. Our Patreon is what makes this broadcast possible and allows us to compensate our guests, and also just makes everything happen here at Tech Tip Talk. So if you are interested in joining us on Patreon, we have a very excellent group of designers and tech editors and knitters who all come together in our Discord channel, and then we meet twice a month for Knit Night. Well, we call it Knit Happy Hour. Thanks, Jen, for calling it that. So
I know,
join
so
us
now
on
it's stuck.
Knit Happy Hour, and it is absolutely happy. Everything that happens in Knit Night stays in Knit Night, so it's a private, not recorded time. Come on over to Patreon and see the different levels you can join at beginning at $5 a month, which is super cheap.
Yeah.
And we also offer all the way up to $50 a month, where you get a one-on-one with both of us for half an hour once a month, which is a lot. We love our patrons, and we're so grateful that they can support us. So yeah, hit us up.
So we're like, and our goal with that is to support you guys. So head over there and see what's going on. So the Merit book booth, if you want to pick it up at the festival, when you pre-order at this link, I think it says you have to put in the notes, pick up at Sheep and Wool in the comment, and it tells you that on that link. It tells you that at the link.
So subscribe here at the YouTube, so that you get the hit the subscribe, ring that bell, so that you get the notifications when we're going to go live next. Our next broadcast is October 16th, 12 p.m. Eastern time. We're doing a little bit, we have a fantastic guest. And if you subscribe to our newsletter, you're going to get all the information ahead of time. You newsletter subscribers find out first, as well as patrons. So I think that's everything. Do we have any more announcements, Christina?
I don't know. I think I'm just excited about the bookmark and the book. And
do you have the bookmark in front of you? I left them. They're all. Oh, there it is.
Then it has a checklist on the back. So we're all about checklists. This is the checklist from the first chapter. We have a checklist at the end of every chapter of the book, and they chose to put the first chapter checklist on the back.
Yeah, it's really exciting, you guys. And seriously, we are so excited to be at this point and at the stage in our book publishing process. So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you guys in a month. I think we're all set. Are we going to do outro?
Do the outro.
All right. Bye, everyone.